Wache ani boju sego. I'm Kiwe Tinway in the Nay. It translates into North Windman. I'm from the people of the Mushkegowok, people of the river, Chapleau Cree First Nation, Bear Clan. And I am a beautiful spirit. And I'm also sitting here with another beautiful spirit, Peter Schuler. And Peter and I are going to spend some time together, and we're just going to have a conversation. Peter is someone that supports Crow Shield Lodge, and we support Peter. Actually, right now, we have our team out here, and we're giving Peter a little bit of help prepping on his land to prepare for winter. But before we start, Peter, I wanted to offer you this little gift for your
Which
time and just for what you're going to be sharing today. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to sit here. And yeah, we're just going to talk about some things, what we've been doing, maybe some things that we've done in the past, and where we hope to be in the future. And I do want to ask you one question, and that's how we can be the best ancestor. But if you could introduce yourself, that would be amazing.
no, bonjour. Ojibiage and Nini Indigo, Michikando Dem, Mississauga, Jibunesh Navi and Dow. New credit to Minawa. Oh, we quit saying new. The credit reserve Minawa Six Nations in Tonjaba. So my English taxpayer name is Peter Schuler. We're sitting on the Mississaugas of the Credit Reserve, where I have a little piece of land here. But I live on Six Nations Reserve, which is just a mile over that way. And I think when it comes to being the best ancestor, is to try to bring back what we've lost and to learn as much as you can, and then you have an obligation to push it ahead into the future. And within my own family, my immediate family, I'm the only one who tries to follow our traditional belief system. My older sister, who's passed away last year, used to always say, you can't go back. And I used to tell her, I'm not trying to go back, I'm trying to bring them back forward. And I think it's important to try to learn the language. And Dojibam Bungyatugo, I only have a tiny, tiny bit of language. And I'm embarrassed, but I'm also happy to see that young people now have more language than I have. They're picking it up, and we have a language being taught in the school. It would be nice if we had full immersion, but not everyone is of the same opinion. And I think it's important to understand what we've lost. And in the language, encoded in the language, is our philosophy, our science, our memory is in the language. And when I say that, I mean, when you lose your oral history, you lose your memory. When you lose all the stories, you're losing memory. And the stories and our oral history that allow us to live here forever without destroying the planet. And through residential school, forced imposition of Christianity, and that we lost our connection to the rest of creation. And I think, we talk about residential school and all the horrific things that happened there. I didn't go there myself. I have relatives who did. Most of them, I think all of them, never ever talked about it. And so what happened there is horrific. It's hard to understand this, but from my perspective anyway, those people who went there and the generations that followed that converted to Christianity, basically under duress, and they're still practicing Christianity. They are continuing to do the work of the residential school. That's not a very popular opinion, and probably a lot of people, I don't say they're terrible people, but they are doing the work of the residential school. And they probably don't even realize it because they don't know what they've lost. So if you have a first generation who has all the knowledge and a second, and you further away from that you go, if that knowledge is not carried through, eventually you come to a point where you don't have any of that knowledge. And it's no fault of their own, but it's hard to get them to understand that they are continuing that work. And the biggest problem, I think, is that they don't understand the connection that our ancestors had with the rest of creation. It was a profound respect and a spiritual connection to the rest of creation that allowed us to live here for eternity without destroying the planet. And the same thing is happening now in South America. If you want to see the history of Canada played out in real time, just go to South America. They're doing exactly the same things there to the indigenous people. Mining companies, big agriculture, forestry are pushing the people off the land, and those who try to protect their land are being murdered. They're being murdered today. They're being forced off their land today. And that's exactly what happened here. And we sit here and, we don't think about it, we don't look at it, and, there are small groups of people who try to protest there, and there are small groups of people who try to support them from here. But it's not the majority of people that even consider what is happening there to be same as the history of Canada. And when you look around, we talk about the rainforest. When you look around, you drive, say, from Brantford to Orangeville, you pass through all kinds of farmland. You never once think this was all covered with trees. You can drive from here to Ottawa, and you never think that 600 years ago you might have been traveling through trees all the way there. And you drive down the 401 or the QEW or any of those highways, you might have at one time been traveling through forest for all that time. And if you look at Google satellite view of where we're sitting now, you can see that the surrounding lands off reserve have far less trees than on reserve. And even on reserve, on Six Nations now, the cigarette business, those people have generated large sums of money. They're building bigger houses, they're clearing land, and so the forest canopy that's here is under threat as well. And that's our own people doing it. And that comes from not knowing what we've lost, not understanding our connection to the rest of creation, or not caring. And that all comes down to the main driver of this whole problem all around the world is greed. And we have stories of that we're not really supposed to talk about until snow's on the ground, but I will mention the name. And we're not even supposed to mention the name, but the Wendigo. And that spirit being, that entity, its essence is greed. It has a hunger that it can't satisfy. It just consumes, and the more it consumes, the bigger it gets. And those are the stories that our ancestors told that kept us in check, that we understood, or they understood, what greed can do. And greed was a crime. Your wealth was not measured by what you had, but what you gave away. And, I look at this I don't even know for sure whether my mother was indigenous or not, because she never met her father, and her mother told her her father was indigenous. And when she was about 75, she thought, I want to try and find, about him, right? And so by chance, she met a person over in Simcoe that had the same last name, and it turned out to be her fourth cousin. And so she was able to connect with her father's other children. And when asked about their identity, they said, no, we're not indigenous. We only said that because it was too hard to be French, which I don't believe for a second, because why would you put your children at risk for being taken away by saying you were indigenous back in that time? Why would you do that? That was back, like my mother was born in 1921. So why would you do that? Right. And so anyway, I have that. And I'm sure, like a lot of 60 Scoop people and other people around who may have been adopted out or lost their identity through government action are in the same boat. You have a story, but you can't prove it. And I haven't dug into that ancestry. And, like, I know how hard it is to try to track those kind of things down. For what limited poking around I have done, you have stories, and you have, find people that will tell you, oh, you should have talked to so-and-so, but they've already passed away. So it's important for us to, if you're starting to dig into your ancestry, to start to reconnect with your home community, if you can find that, and try to find relatives, try to talk to them, and try to build out your family history. It's important to do. I don't think it's easy, because not everybody wants to talk to you. And but on the other hand, there are people who will welcome you with open arms because they understand what happened to us. So anyway, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
That did. That answered it in a very, very defined way, and thank you for that. When you were talking about loss, what you lost or what we've lost, I'm always trying to think of the treaties. How the treaties were there to give the indigenous people something, but then how those treaties were never upheld. And then when I hear the treaty, the land between the lakes, is that a treaty?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm trying to I have where one thing says 4 million acres, another thing says 3 million acres, and then what is that land today?
Well, when it comes to treaties, I'm not really knowledgeable about the specifics of treaties, but from my observation, there's a pattern. And the pattern is starvation, treaty, starvation, treaty, starvation, treaty. So if you look at the treaties, just look at you can describe it as legalized theft, because the treaties, I don't believe, were ever put into motion to be upheld. A lot of them were broken the day after they were signed. Some of them were only signed by the government, and there was nobody there except the government, right? And so looking backwards now and you start poking around, you can see there's a pattern, and you can see that the treaties are not only not upheld, there's laws put in place that prevent them from being honored. So we have a treaty that says you can hunt and gather. So the first thing that happens is that the settlers come in on that land, and then they put up fences, then they pass laws against trespassing, and eventually, as time goes on, you have laws that say you can only hunt between now and now, and you can only, take whatever, one animal or whatever the laws
Your
are.
tag.
Yeah, and so basically we were forced off the land. Even though you agree, because our idea of a treaty was sharing, not surrendering, but sharing the land. And I know in Oakville they have Treaty 14, Treaty 22. One of those treaties was made with the understanding the government would hold this land for us. They would protect that land. That land was sold off right after they made the treaty. And the Toronto Purchase, I think 1805, they surrendered X number acres of land, and then, I don't know, a few years later they said, we have to get you to re-sign this because the signatures are just pasted on this document. Right away there's a red flag. So here's the original treaty. The second time they signed it, it was like that. They doubled the area, right? And so all kinds of things like that. If you start researching these treaties, there's all kinds of things that happen like that. We even have it on record that treaty negotiations were canceled because the government couldn't get the rum there. So if I was to get you drunk and you signed over your house to me today, not only would that not hold up in court, I would probably end up in jail.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And so what makes it legal back then?
Yeah.
And what makes it legal for the government to come along and say, I'm going to take all your kids and stuff them in this building over here.
Yeah.
And we're going to make them speak English. And, some of them don't come home. They die there. And in some cases, the parents are never notified that they died. And their bodies aren't shipped back to their home community to be buried. This is what the government did. And so when it comes to treaties, you have to look at all of this stuff. It's not just the treaty that you lost. It's what they did to you as a people. Essentially trying to wipe us out. And as far as I'm concerned, the government has never changed. I say there's two constants. There's us and there's the government. Their goal has never changed. They still want to wipe us out, either by legislative genocide. They've kind of maybe sort of given up on killing us off.
Right.
But they would like to wipe us out by getting rid of their fiduciary responsibility, by turning all these reserves into municipalities. All those kind of things, that they want us to make us same as everybody else.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, when they give clean water to all the reserves, same as everybody else has access to clean water, when that happens, I might consider calling myself Canadian, but until then, I'm Anishinaabe. I don't care to be a Canadian. And that, you're forced to live under the laws that they put in place. But you know, we had a discussion last night. I sit on Indigenous Education Advisory Committee, and part of the discussion was, what days do you get off to go to ceremony? How many days, or, you know? And you know, like for me, we have 4 main ceremonies, and because of residential school, because of government action, they're not here anymore. We have to travel. We go to Manitoba, or we go to Manitoulin Island. So if we go to Manitoba, it takes you 2 days to drive there, 4 days of ceremonies, 2 days to drive home. If my math is correct, that's 8 days. And that's really, really pushing it to do that. So if I was working, you know, I would have to take a week off. And when the last company I worked for, I said, you know, before you hire me, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to attend these ceremonies. And they're 4 times a year, and I need a week off every time, minimum. And they agreed to that. And so I was a foreman, so I would take that time off. The first time I took it off, when I came back, they would say, "How was your holiday?" Going to ceremonies is not a holiday. And they kept on asking that. And then it got to the point where, you take more holidays than anybody else in this company. Not holidays. And, you know, and the other part that happens is our ceremonies don't follow the calendar. We don't do Christmas. We don't do Easter. We don't do all those other holidays. And so if you try to follow your own belief system, you are out of step with everybody else. And you know, my view back then was, I was looking for a job when I found this one. So if they fired me, they fired me. I didn't care. But I'm still going to chase this, because it's important to try to bring this back. And it's really, really difficult to try to bring our stuff home, because in this community was totally Christianized a long time ago. And there's only a few of us that try to bring things back. And it's taken me, I don't know, almost 30 years before someone goes and they're going to try to do this. And you know, like, you have to build out numbers to make things work. You can't do this all by yourself. And you know, you can do so much, but I can't bring the ceremonies here, the full ceremonies, all by myself. You have to have a core of people to do that. And hopefully I live long enough to see that happen. But that's my goal. And to me, that's honoring the treaty, to be able to follow your own ways of being. And I don't think the government sees it that way, but we do make a little moves ahead. But I think a lot of times it's 1 step ahead and 3 back when it comes to dealing with the government.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. You know, I just brought up the treaties just because of you know, the Haldeman track and the land between 2 lakes, and now with the Robinson Huron. And you know, that was very concerning for me, because you know, I heard that individuals could be getting away anywhere from like 70, 80,000 up to $220,000. And for an individual who's never had that kind of money, that could be very, very concerning. That could make them or break them. And I heard that a lot of these dealerships, before they were getting their money, were going into these communities and parking all of these vehicles to show them what they could have. Once again, greed, right? Greed. Yep. Trying to influence the people to do things. And you know, I've always heard that greed is the worst disease that was ever brought to us. because it influences people to be very self-centered and to not think about the decisions they're making today and how they're going to impact those 7 generations that aren't here yet.
Yeah, that is a concern. Like we had when we got the Toronto land claim, I voted against accepting it because A, I didn't think it was nearly enough money
Right.
for what we lost. And, I remember the lawyer saying, the government has observed that if there's a cash dispensation, it's far easier to get an agreement and a settlement. Basically, the government has observed that we can bribe you. That's what
That's what it is.
those fancy words say. And so they announced that everyone would be getting $20,000. Now, my first thought was everybody's brains have just now left for Walmart. And they're figuring out where they're going to spend this. And as a matter of fact, there was somebody in that room, and I don't know who it was, and I really don't care, I don't want to know who it was, who stood up and said, when can I get my money? They hadn't even come to this agreement yet, haven't even voted on it yet, and somebody's saying, when can I get my money? And like you say, if you've never had money before, you think the $20,000 is a lot of money. And it is a good portion of money, but it's not a lot of money. And, it disappears really fast. Like some people, that money was gone in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And with the Roberts and Huron, we didn't sign that. We've always said we never signed it, right? And so when I look at that, I say, okay, if we didn't give up this, what do you owe us?
Yeah.
Right? But we don't get anything, right? But what if we didn't say we're going to give this up and you took it? It's like stealing my car.
Yeah.
And but it's not all about money. It's about protecting the land. And when I see all these people, getting these big lumps of money, I always ask myself, what are you really giving up? Because the government is going to say, now we're washed our hands now. And that's what they're trying to do, is wash their hands of any responsibility for what they've done. And there's one thing you cannot wash your hands of, and I don't care who you are. You cannot wash your hands off what we've done to the earth. We have climate change. We have all these things that are now coming to the forefront because climate change can't be denied anymore.
Right.
And, I think it was 1954, Hurricane Hazel came up. And, I can't remember, I think there was 80, maybe 81 people died
Okay.
from that. You can look that up, but that number sticks in my head. That doesn't mean it's right, but anyway, it sticks in my head.
Okay.
And so that's when all the regulations came in against building on floodplains and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But since then, because we're, as human beings, not that smart, developers are pushing to build on these places, and and so that kind of creeps back in, right? So I've had this thought for the last, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years. What would happen if we, in the Grand River watershed, got 6 inches of rain over the whole watershed? When we've seen pictures of what happened in the Carolinas, right?
Right.
Well, we don't have that mountainous terrain, but if we did get 6 inches of rain or an event like that, we have no idea how far that water would come out from the river where its banks now.
Right.
I mean, if it went up 20 feet or 30 feet, there would be a mess. And and I've thought about this because we have these cycles, which are natural. But when you start messing with the climate, these cycles repeat more often, and they shift where things happen. And so I look at this and I think, climate change is real. We have to try to do something. We can't stop it. And I want to live to be 100 because I want to see what's going to happen. I'm not afraid of this, but I want to see what's going to happen.
That's awesome.
And one of the reasons why I say this is because in our creation story, and this is really, really important. In our creation story, the first thing that's created is thought. The creator himself, sends out this thought and wonders what's out there in all that darkness. And the thought creates a sound. And when it's called back, it creates light. And and then things are set into motion. And but the key thing is this thought. And so we create what we think. And like a long time ago, before cell phones and all this computers and everything, you got your news from the radio, newspapers.
Right.
In the back of the newspaper was a comic section. There was Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy was a detective. He had this watch he could talk into, and there was video was on that watch and everything. That was science fiction. I'm thinking, like when I was a kid. So, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, that was science fiction. Today we have the smartwatch, right?
Yes.
And so we create what we think. So when we look at all these games, video games we have, where people are blowing up things, there's all blood and gore and all that kind of stuff. Look around the world. That's been going on for a long time, but it's getting worse, right?
It is.
And we need to change the way we think. So we should have video games that you get reward for fighting climate change with some action, right?
There you go.
Or helping the old lady across the street with her groceries, or all those kind of things that are making better communities. We need video games based on that.
I like that.
So we could change the way we think. When you look at climate change, we have a whole industries who are devoted to denying that fossil fuels cause climate change or whatever, forestry or whatever. They're devoted to making sure that that you have this misinformation. They can do research, but that doesn't mean the research is true. So somewhere at home I have this research paper that says it can be proven that 100% of the research papers are false. You have to know who paid for the research, because the one who's paying for the research influences the result of the research. And so I remember this guy used to say, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. And and that's what I see happening, right?
Right.
And so you don't know. There's so much misinformation nowadays that you don't know whether what you're reading or hearing is true or not. And it's harder and harder to try to find the truth. But when you start looking at these old stories, or oral history. Um, we know about the Ice Age. We have stories about the runners on the ice. We have stories about a certain figure chasing this giant beaver, and the beaver he breaks the dam, so trying to catch the beaver. And I believe that's the retreat of the Ice Age,
Okay.
when the Great Lakes form.
Right.
And like all these stories, there's a story, but then there's the story under the story.
Right.
And like our language and our stories are full of metaphors. And you hear the story, there's always something in that story you have to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
What does it really mean? Because you have the story here, but then there's the underlying message on the bottom there somewhere. And so we don't hear these old stories anymore.
Right.
And there's a book. It was William Jones who collected all these stories back around early 1900s, 1907, somewhere around there.
Okay.
He went around and he interviewed all these elders and he collected all these stories. So the stories are written in Ojibwe because he was a fluent speaker,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're translated into English. So you lose about 50 to 60% of the meaning when they go over to English, but the stories, the baseline is still there, right? And so I've tried to get fluent speakers to interpret the Ojibwe side.
Okay.
And they all say the same thing. It's very, very old language.
Okay.
So some of the words may not be in use anymore, or, meanings are obscure or whatever. But I think it's important to try to bring those back. And it's try to bring back what our ancestors knew.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know that much. After I pull my finger out, that's about how much I know, which isn't much. Growing all over the place. But do we know what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Do we know how to use it?
Mm-hmm.
And out of view right here is a sweat lodge, right? And so we use that. And do we use it to the full potential that our ancestors did? I probably have to say no,
Mm-hmm.
but we're trying, and it does help people. And that's something that I've been doing for over 20 years, but I'm still learning, because I know there are people who know far, far more about that than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And but you have to try to bring back, and people have asked me to teach them how to do this, and I say, okay, but I haven't taught anyone, because they don't come here when it's time to split the wood. They don't come here when it's time to get the lodge ready to go. They don't come here to clean up afterwards. Or how to, they don't come here when we build a lodge. And so if you want to learn this, you have to start from ground up.
Yep.
When I was learning this, when we went to ceremonies, if there wasn't a lodge where we went, we had to build this. And, as I'll say young because I was old when I started, but as a beginner,
Yep.
you had to go and help build this. And they would talk about what they were doing, and, and so, there was Eddie Benton Benet Ibun, who brought these ceremonies back. And so you learn from those guys. And, when I went to Manitoba, it was Charlie Nelson Ibun who ran those ceremonies out there. And you learned from them. But, it's, if you don't have the language, it's really hard to understand all of this.
Right.
And to practice all of it. And, those people, those elders, they stuck their necks out to bring this back. Because back in the 80s, 70s, you had the American Indian movement. You had all of those people pushing for our rights. And so our ceremonies were against the law. Like 100 years ago, you could be arrested, put in jail because you have a sweat lodge.
Yeah.
Even today, in some of the northern communities, I heard a story within 5 years ago that a young person put up a sweat lodge, the priest and the police came and they burned it down.
Wow.
That's still going on, And like, I just shake my head. That's just ridiculous. And and I think the biggest problem there is that people don't understand what Christianity did in the separation of us from the rest of creation. That, when you separate, then you are given license to destroy everything. You're told you're the boss. You are way up here, everything else is down. You're on top, which isn't true. I mean, our belief system says we are woven into the blanket of creation. We're part of creation. I'm no important than that tree is right there. As a matter of fact, that tree is probably more important than I am. And like, we understood the rest of creation is what keeps us alive.
Yeah. Yep.
If the rest of creation gets degraded or disappears, we will die. If we disappeared, the rest of creation will flourish.
Yes. Yes.
So we are not the most important being on the planet. And so in the woodshed over there, there's a lot of ash. Because in this bush lot here, the emerald ash borer came and literally decimated all the ash trees in this bush. There's not one mature or even this big around live ash tree in this bush.
That's sad.
So I asked this question. If that emerald ash borer had a brain, and maybe it does, I don't know, and it knew that it was chewing its way out of its existence, if it was destroying all of its food, would it quit killing the trees? And people say, well, they don't have brains, so that's, they can't help themselves. And I say, okay, we have brains and we're doing the same thing this bug is doing. So if we have brains, why aren't we, who are supposed to be the superior, most intelligent being on the planet, killing ourselves? And part of the problem is we don't live long enough. If we live to be 500 years old, you would see the result of your actions that you took when you were 10. Right?
Yep.
So if you're at 10 years old, you see them cutting all these trees down and everything, right? And you can see everything that changed over a 500-year period.
Yep.
You might think to yourself, hey, this is not a good idea. And so I say we don't live long enough to, we make our mistakes over and over, right? And that's part of oral history. Oral history gave you that 500-year lifespan because you heard these stories from way back there and what happened. And we don't do this. We look at history, but do we learn anything from it? Because if you look at Canadian history, it's a big lie.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what are you going to learn from a lie? You're going to learn to lie, right?
True.
And so anyway, those are kind of things that I think about. And like, we're sitting here and it's what, 70 degrees?
It's, yeah,
at least.
This is not...
Well, we're in the shade, right? And this is October 20
something.
21 or 2.
22, I think.
And and this is not normal.
No, it's not.
And I remember, like, there's shagbark hickory here. There's a couple over there. There's some over there. And I remember as kids, we would go out and collect hickory nuts.
Okay.
And it would be, you might have a nice sunny day like this, but it would be cold. You'd have to have your jacket on. And I wouldn't be doing that in my t-shirt.
Right.
And you know, every year, it seems we're, well, if you just go by scientific record, every year we're breaking records.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting warmer and warmer. And, you know, like, some people, oh, it's natural. Okay, well, if it is natural, that's fine. But when you have a naturally warm day and you light your wood stove in your house, it gets pretty hot in there.
It does. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It's not like it's minus 25 and you got your wood stove going. And so I look at the world and I say, okay, there may be a natural cycle, but our wood stove is going. Right? We lit the stove, right? And so I don't know what the solutions are. Well, I do, but I don't think anybody will buy it. Number one, you got to cut out greed. The problem with that is we don't recognize what greed is anymore.
Right.
We say that person is really smart. We say they're really ambitious. We say they're all of those adjectives to justify a billionaire. But we never say the billionaire is greedy. We don't say that. And you know, and so we see all the shiny toys they have. So what do we want? We want the same shiny toys. And you know, like, when I was about to retire, I'm looking at my bills and I'm thinking, how am I going to pay all this with, you know, I'm not working, and, you know, how am I going to pay my bills? And so at that time, I was looking at our electric bill, right? And it was getting higher and higher, and I'm thinking, this is our largest bill. How am I going to pay that? And I thought, well, I should look into solar. I don't have to pay any hydro anymore, right? So you look into that, and sure, you can do that. It's going to cost you $40,000 to get off the grid and maybe feed back into the grid, right? And so, well, can't afford that. So then I thought, well, we have these new LED lights, going to use less electricity. We have, you know, more modern appliances. We can switch to all that. And then I thought, well, that's only going to cut it down a tiny bit. And now they added delivery charges, so I don't see the hydro truck with a full load of electricity coming, but they're charging me for that, right? And the delivery charges as much as what I use, or sometimes more, so that's not going to work either. Then I remember my grandmother. So my grandmother lived in a house, no running water. Her house like over there. Yep. No electricity. She had coal oil lamps. So there's the other thing. Do you really need all these things? Because I think we're living with our wants, not with our needs.
I like that.
And so when COVID came and everything locked down, just before COVID came, I got this driveway put in here so I could come back here. And so when COVID came, I came here, started clearing out the buckthorn, and I built that little roundhouse over there. I started to build that, right? And so, you know, the price of lumber doubled, so I scrounged around and I got used lumber. I got a whole bunch of skids and took them all apart and pulled all the nails out, ran the boards through a planer. So that's what most of the interior of that roundhouse is made from,
yep.
Right? Because I had lots of time.
Yeah.
And so we didn't really go anywhere, right? So I filled my truck up once a month, right? And sometimes even 6 weeks, I would get out of a tank of gas, right? Because we weren't going anywhere. Well, this didn't really bother me because this is more like how we lived as a kid.
Right.
That you went to town when you needed something. You just didn't go there for the heck of it. You didn't just drive all over the place. And so for me, I thought, I like this. You spend time out here, hear the birds, you do some work, and got lots of exercise, and you're building something that hopefully can bring our own ways of being back. And so what my dad taught me was to use your common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I do that very often, but he taught me how to do that, and to not be afraid of work, and to figure things out, make do with what you had. And my dad had grade 2 education, and people used to ask him where he went to university. And he built this water pressure system, and everybody said it wouldn't work. But because he didn't know it wouldn't work, he made it work.
Hmm.
And this is something that I think about, as Indigenous people, we were very, very resourceful and smart.
Yep.
And when the Europeans came here, they said, we're going to civilize you. And I say they didn't do that. They did the reverse. They uncivilized us. Because when they came, they weren't civilized, and they're still not civilized. Because you can't call yourself civilized if you burn down your own house, which is exactly what we're doing. Is we're burning down the planet.
Yep.
We cannot say we're civilized. Those few people left in the Amazon that still live the way they were before anyone came, those are civilized people. They understand where they fit in the rest of creation, and that's where they are. We are not civilized.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate way to look at things, but that's the truth of it. That is the truth of it. And I remember you telling me that our mother will do whatever she needs to protect herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I also remember that maybe that relates to COVID.
Yep.
Where things slowed down so much because our mother was under so much stress and duress that that this virus came.
Well, I think if my information is correct, most pandemics come from environmental destruction,
Okay.
where the human population gets into or pushed into or disturbs areas and things that they wouldn't normally interact with.
Okay.
Like that Ebola virus.
Yep. Yep.
Someone went into a cave that was full of bats and bat poop and or whatever,
Yep.
and they contacted that virus, and they went from there. And there was a book about that whole thing, and when we look at climate change, I have this uncomfortable thought or question. What's locked up in the permafrost? They recently dug up a complete baby mammoth.
Right.
That was almost entirely intact.
Wow.
Right? They have uncovered things that have been frozen for thousands of years, and they come back to life. Viruses and bacteria and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what pathogens are there
Yeah.
that we have no clue what they are and no means to stop them if they activate.
Yeah, we can't combat them.
And like to me, I look at things and I think to myself, there are, if you look at the earth, um, and if you look at it as a living organism,
Yep.
where everything is working together, has natural cycles, has natural um, um, checks and balances. There's too many people on the planet.
Yeah.
We have thrown all of that out of whack. And so the checks and balances were diseases.
Right.
Where we say, okay, we're making great strides in preventing this and extending life, et cetera, and figuring out how to have more people survive on less land and all that kind of stuff. We have population out of control. And this thought came to me, I don't know, 25 years ago or so. Is cancer is cancer a reflection of what we are doing to the earth? That cancer is cells that go bonkers and just keep replicating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rogue.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we the cancer on the earth? Well, I don't think that's a question. We are the cancer on the earth,
Yeah.
and because we've lost our place, we've taken over control, where we I guess the indigenous populations around the world understood this, where we're supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
and once you lose that, I believe we do become the cancer on the earth, and so how do you reverse that?
Right. Right.
And like, so I just look at cancer. Like right now, my youngest daughter has stage 3 cancer, right?
Sorry to hear about that.
And so how do they go about this, to try to cure it or stop it or whatever? You have chemotherapy, you have radiation, you have hormone therapy, which you're basically trying to either kill off those extra cells or rogue cells, or I guess kill them off, because you got to shrink the tumors or whatever. And like, if you apply that to the earth, and we're the cancer,
Right.
there we go, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally think we evolved too quickly in the past couple hundred years. I think we forgot about our roles and responsibilities. And because I remember, Peter, when I was growing up and a little kid, cancer wasn't mentioned.
It wasn't like, um, I remember, you hear of cancer once in a while, but nothing like today.
Nothing. It's impacted all of our families.
And so, um, like, and then you have to look at, okay, when we mess around with Earth's natural ways of being, I look at things, okay, there are a lot of things that were buried in the earth.
Yep.
That would have precluded life on Earth. You have uranium,
Right.
you have all kinds of chemicals, and when we start manipulating that, the greed system will try to utilize everything that they create, even if they create something that's harmful. Like you have these forever chemicals that, like in your non-stick frying pans and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the greed cycle will say, well, we have to use that. We have to make money out of this. and they'll maybe stumble on, okay, hey, this does, put this on there, and nothing will stick to your frying pan, right? And they will ignore the sciences that say this is not good for you, right? And they will influence, like the FDA or whatever those regulatory bodies that would say, hey, you can't use that.
Right.
They will lobby them. They will bribe them. Or whatever. Well, lobby is just another word for bribery, I think.
Right. Right.
That's the sugar-coated version, I guess.
Okay. All right.
And so anyway, they will, push that through, right? And so we poison ourselves, by eating like a lot of the foods that we eat, processed foods, and like I remember when I was 16, so that's 61 years ago. If you bought French fries, they were cooked in lard, animal fat, right?
Yep.
Then all of a sudden, animal fat's no good for you.
Yep.
And so now we have all these vegetable oils and stuff, right? And I'm thinking to myself, the French fries tasted better in lard, and I'm pretty sure that was not as bad as what we're eating today.
Oh, for sure.
And because you have to have some fat, right? Especially in a cold climate, right?
Yes.
You need this fat. Like bears don't get fat for nothing, right?
That's right.
And if you look at like I saw a picture of people on a beach from 1950s, right?
Yep.
There's no fat people in that picture.
None.
You know? And so we have the food, which is making us obese. We have a lifestyle where we're sitting down all the time, and we wonder, what's causing all this?
Yeah.
Like it's right in front of your face.
Yeah, we're the problem.
Yep.
We're the problem. It's thanks for sharing that. I think about we've sat before and you've shared some things with me about climate change and about the Inuit,
Mm-hmm.
how they knew about it. I think the year I was born, 1965,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That they knew something was going on because things were shifting and changing that they've never seen before.
Yep. So that story was from Greenland, where I met this guy
Okay.
that, when he was a teenager, they noticed that things were out of whack, and his parents and elders accused him of drinking because they would, say, hey, there's water coming out of this ice over here, they thought they were out drinking, right? But as it turned out, when they went there, the water was coming out of there, and they sent him to the United Nations to say, hey, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
And when he comes back, his father asked him, did they hear you? And he said, oh yeah, I got a standing ovation. And he says, did they hear you? I told you I got a standing ovation. Did they hear you? And he, what he was really saying was, did they listen to you?
Right.
Did they believe you? They may have believed him and they may have listened, but they shoved it under the rug. And if you look right now, the climate change in the north is way, way faster than what's happening here. And if we had the same, we'd be dead.
Yeah.
We'd be cooked.
Yeah.
If the temperature rose as fast here as it has been up there. And I don't know what the answers are, but I look around and I say, hey, we have all this farmland that's not being farmed.
Right.
It was covered with trees once.
Yep.
Why don't we plant trees on all that land? Not just the same tree, but like if you look around here, there's a cherry tree there, there's a white oak, there's a shagbark hickory, there's a pignut hickory, there's elm, there's blue beech, and there's used to be lots of ash. Plant a forest like this,
Yeah.
because forest influences the weather.
Yes.
It creates its own weather, right? If you are sitting here in the middle of summer when it's 34 degrees out there, it's going to be, like 9 or 10 degrees cooler sitting right here
In the bush. Yeah.
in the bush.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's common sense. We have this, available land that could be in trees. Put it back to trees.
Yeah.
Make it a law. If you're not using it,
For sure.
trees.
We need them.
Yep.
We need them. People don't understand how the trees help us in so many ways.
Yep. Even like to mitigate flooding.
Yep.
To hold the soil in place.
Erosion.
Yep.
Yep.
Plant the trees.
Yeah.
And, it brings back wildlife. Like this morning, when I got here, there was a raven chuckling away in the bush over here. Ravens weren't here 5 years ago. They were never here when I was a kid.
Okay.
It's only like in the last maybe 3 years that I've seen a raven here. Bald eagles. Never saw those when I was a kid either. So I would say 2000 when I first saw one around here.
Yep.
And so those eagles are coming back because they quit using DDT. However, now we're killing off the insects with sprays that they're using that are banned in Europe.
Right.
No insects, no flowers, no food.
No hope.
No hope.
Right.
And like it's greed.
Yeah.
Because they say, oh, we need this to grow these crops, right? Well, if our population didn't get out of whack, you wouldn't need so much.
Yeah.
And like I look at our economy. Our economy is just a Ponzi scheme. The Ponzi scheme only works if it's growing. It has to expand. You have to keep drawing money in from somebody to give to, make it look like it's working. Our economy is a Ponzi scheme.
Okay.
As soon as it slows down or stops, everybody hits the panic button. Right? Has to keep on expanding.
Yeah.
And that's greed. Why can't it be static? Like it can be static if you don't need a new iPhone every 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you don't need the iPhone at all. And you drive your car for 20 years. You grow your own food. You don't have to have, all these, I call them gadgets and must-haves.
Okay. Yeah.
Like you don't need, I would say 80% of the stuff that we think is important is just junk.
True.
And like my wife gets mad at me because I got t-shirts that are 25 years old.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And as a matter of fact, they might be collector's items, but but anyway, and I wear these jeans. So I got holes in here, right?
Okay.
A few holes in there, and you should buy new jeans. Well, these are okay for working, and I spend a fair bit of time working, so like. I look at I don't care what your title is. I don't care if you're a doctor, lawyer, whatever. You're just a human being to me.
Yeah.
And like I say, try to be a good human being. It's far more important than trying to put letters behind your name and climbing ladders or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Try to be a human being, a good one.
Yeah.
And by that I mean you're good to people but you're also good to our relatives standing here. And that's important.
It is.
And if you're not doing that, then can you call yourself a good human being? If you're like that emerald ash borer and you're chewing down the things that are going to keep you alive, can you call yourself? I don't care whether you got 75 letters behind your name or you're the best doctor in the world,
Right.
or whatever that position is. Are you really a good human being? And anyway, those are some of my crazy ideas.
Those are great ideas, Peter. And what it is, it's retrieving what we lost. It's revitalizing the culture, and creating more places and spaces for people to pick up what they've lost, right? And I just think it's so great sitting out here today. You know, where I'm sitting with you. There's a breeze. It's sunny out. It's nice in the forest here. The leaves are falling. You know, it reminds me of a teaching where this is the season where when we become synced up with creation, we start doing the same thing that creation is doing, and the trees are starting to get rid of their leaves, and you know they're preparing, and we should be doing the same thing, getting rid of those vices, those things in our lives that don't serve us a purpose. But then I also have a teaching that, you know, our ancestors are just a thickness of a leaf away from us. So
Yep.
so they're always with us, and you know, I think with our ancestors and with hope and with revitalization, I really hope that we can go back to the basics and bring people back to the land, and start revitalizing these ceremonies, the cultures, the teachings. But I'm always concerned about people messing with the natural law, trying to control the environment, trying to control the weather, trying to control all of these things instead of working with it, right? And that's just one of my concerns. But what was really wild today, Peter, I drove through here from Cambridge, and I drove through Birch. And that triggered a whole bunch of memories for me, because when I was 16 years old, I made some wrong decisions. I wasn't really thinking with my head, and greed was involved, and there was some repercussions for those decisions that I made, and I spent 6 months in Birch. Right, I don't even know where it is, but it just made me reflect back to that time and where I was at that time of my life and where I'm at today, where you know, we're really trying to do our best to have a good heart and a good mind, and we stewarding the land and knowing that this is a gift and this is our mother and this is our responsibility. But also, this is one of our biggest barriers, is to get back to the land, to get on the land. So what we did is, just about a month ago, we found a firm in Waterloo, and we started doing a land trust. So it's going to cost us a bit of money, but we're going to secure land and property for those 7 generations that aren't here yet, and create more places and spaces. Why? Because it needs to be done, and it's the right thing to do. And we're not going to work against the land. We're going to work with the land. This is for preservation and for ecology purposes, and for passing on the teachings and ceremonies to the next generations.
Well, all that work is important, and it's kind of it's kind of easy to get discouraged when you try to do this kind of stuff, because there's so few people doing that. Like in this community, we have Mark Salt, who went away up north and worked up there for many years, and when he retired, he came back, and he brought back the traditional knowledge that he gained up there for like smoking fish, working with wild rice and all that kind of stuff. And so the last few years they've had a 2-day event, Fall Harvest.
Yep.
over near where our school is.
Okay.
And so they bring in people who might be tanning hides or uh, um, preparing wild rice, um, smoking fish,
Mm-hmm.
preparing the fish. They smoked venison, they smoked some buffalo, and I don't know if they smoked fish or not, but I'm pretty sure they did. 'Cause I didn't have time to go over there. I took some hickory
Yep.
for their smoking, and some poplar for getting their fire for parching the rice. Um, but those kind of things, are important.
Yeah.
And like talk to Mark. He's run off his feet, right? Because people want this, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't go looking for things to do, but I always have something to do. And like you have to kind of say no sometimes because you just can't keep up
Yeah.
and look after your own things. And with my daughter being sick now, I have to kind of really not promise too much, because if I get these last minute appointments and someone has to take her, either my wife has to take her or I have to take her or whatever. So kind of have to pull back a little bit. But I don't know. The greatest thing about our teachings is that our creation story doesn't have an ending.
I love that.
So we create what we think. If your creation story has an ending, guess what? You're going to create the ending. So that's what makes me optimistic, is that our creation story doesn't have an ending. So, there's constant change. It's either change might be fast or slow, but there's no ending.
Yeah.
And so that's my message. Go back to your own ways of being. There's no ending in our creation story.
That's amazing. Thanks, Peter. And if I could say anything, just do the best you can in everything that you do, and creation will give its best back to you. Creator, Peter, Mother, this was a beautiful day. I can't thank you enough, my brother.
Miigwech.
And yeah, I guess I got to get back to work. The team's still working out there. I can hear them working away. They shut down the power tools. But now that we're done, that's going to get fired back up. And I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your gifts. I want to thank you for your knowledge and for being a beautiful, beautiful man.
Well, I don't have much knowledge. Whatever knowledge I have, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to our ancestors and what they give to us.
Amazing. Well, then we always have to give thanks for our ancestors and the work they did for us and the prayers they said for us to come here. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in, for watching Peter and I share some time together, some memories, some space, and I wish you all the best. And I can't wait to meet you all somewhere, someplace, sometime. Oh,
Mama P.
Mama P.